Well. Good morning, everybody. Russ of the West Ham Network. Hope you're safe and well. Happy Tuesday. Mikhail Gorbachev still in the house. But it's getting a little bit better. Anyway, hope everyone is well. Yesterday we had lots of stuff. We spoke about the academy and the academy show. We spoke about Tomáš Souček, went through all the stats with the breakdown. And then we spoke about people who've gone out on loan, the academy, who's gone on Beckis, loads of stuff. And one thing we covered was discussions about potential destinations for Niclas Füllkrug and AC Milan being another destination for him, as well as the likes of Stuttgart and Hamburg. And there was a report suggesting that maybe AC Milan would be looking to swap Niclas Füllkrug for Santiago Jimenez, and that got me a little bit excited. He's a player I've always liked, Santiago Jimenez, and I was gutted we didn't get him when he was at Feyenoord, but whether we would get him, it might be pie in the sky. However, more developments about Niclas Füllkrug and his potential whereabouts come the end of the January transfer window. As according to reports, primarily ex-WHU employee, as well as reports from Sky, from Patrick Berger, not the former Czech Premier League international goal scorer, but the German correspondent for Sky Sports Germany. They have suggested that West Ham have given permission for Niclas Füllkrug's agents to find him a new club in the January transfer window. According to X on his Patreon, he said it's fair to say the transfer has been another major disappointment. Attempt to find the club a proven Premier League striker. His time at the club has been completely disrupted by injuries. There are a number of clubs who are said to be interested in a move for him, many from his home countries, we said, like Stuttgart, Hamburg, even maybe a move back to Dortmund potentially, and a few from the likes of Italy, with Milan looking at one or another club supposedly looking at him. Juventus were interested in him over the summer. Real Madrid have been interested in him. The key thing is, the point is, it says here, Füllkrug will continue to be considered for selection by Nuno and should return from injury after the international break. However, should a suitable offer come in for him in January, he will be allowed to depart. And similarly, he will be and there's two criteria. One is he has to have a decent offer for him. I don't know what the offer is. It could even be a loan spell with obligation to buy at the end. But we have to have had a replacement already through the doors, basically. So that could lend itself to a potential swap deal for one of the clubs interested in him. It's a World Cup year. I think personally, Germany, if he's going to go anywhere, I'd be turned back to Germany. Would make most sense in terms of his chances for breaking or maintaining his place in the German squad. Obviously, he's injured, so he's not away on international duty with Germany this international break. So the reports are he'll be back for selection after the international break. Same as Dinos Mavropanos as well, who hasn't obviously travelled with Greece either, still recovering from his injury. And so you would assume he'd get at least maybe a week or so training with Nuno. And it does surprise me about West Ham's decision. It might be a case of just cutting their losses now with him. For me, there is a player there, particularly under the Nuno way of playing. As I said, and I've spoken about it many times, at Wolves, the likes of Raúl Jiménez, he transformed his football trajectory, really. And Chris Woods as well, they bought him from Newcastle for, I think, about 15 million quid, I think it was, something like that. And he then, became one of the Premier League's top goal scorers, and that's, consecutive seasons. So I can see a lot of parallels to Füllkrug, to the likes of Chris Woods and Raúl Jiménez in terms of their style of play. However, injuries, and that's been the issue. I think if he hadn't had injuries, I think we'd have seen a different transfer. And it's another one in a catalogue of strikers that hasn't worked. On paper, Niclas Füllkrug, I think, should have worked. On paper, I think 𝗪𝗏 should have worked as well. But we just have never had any luck. And it's not under, this manager or the previous manager. Proverbially, we haven't been able to buy a striker who has been consistent. In fact, our only consistent strikers or consistent goal scorers aren't actually strikers. Mikel Antonio was bought as a right winger, right wing back, and is currently our top Premier League goal scorer of all time. 𝗔𝗟𝗪𝗘𝗏 isn't a striker. He's a right winger, and he's 8 goals away from the all-time record. We spoke at Tomáš Souček yesterday. He is not a striker, although he is playing striker at the moment, but he is not an out-and-out striker. And if you go through our sort of history, our back catalogue, I'd suggest of the last 10, 15 years, the players who are scoring the most are converted strikers. So Mikel, we look at someone like Bowen, look at someone like Arnautovic as well. These guys weren't bought in to be strikers, but they became strikers. And the issue being, the person we bring in, is it going to be another dud? And unfortunately, based on previous sort of form, it could be. It could easily be. And there's a risk of every player, but it just seems our sort of risk of, bringing in the right strikers and bringing in a player who's a Premier League proven striker, it hasn't worked. And, we bring in one who's 35, 36 in terms of Callum Wilson, who's, goal to game ratio, he's up there with the best of Premier League strikers we've had, in all honesty. He played, was it, I don't know, 8 games, 7 games, 2-3 goals already, it's not a bad hit rate already. But it does look like it could be a case of 𝗷𝗓𝗪𝗘𝗏, not 𝗷𝗓𝗪𝗘𝗏, but 𝗷𝗓𝗪𝗘𝗏 come January. I think it's going to be interesting to see, you look at the pedigree of clubs that he's being or allegedly coming in for him. There is still value in Niclas Füllkrug. This hasn't worked. Do you know what? I was gutted for him, because I thought that over the summer, he looked fit, he looked lean, he looked determined, he looked like he had something to prove, and I still think he does, really. But then you have the injuries, and it just, if you're a 25-year-old striker or a 28-year-old striker, you could probably shove them off and build it. But at the age of 32, I think he's 33 soon. This is going to be his last World Cup as well, realistically. So he needs to be playing consistently to get in. You've got the likes of Niclas 𝗪𝗘𝗪 from Newcastle, who is, one of their first choice strikers, although he didn't play very well against us. But, there's competition for him. And, I think if a good loan move comes in with an obligation to buy, I think we'd probably bite our hands off, cut our losses, bring in a younger model, and someone we can build on. I think there's guys in the academy who could eventually take that spot. I think, for me, out of the pick of them, in terms of the way Nuno plays, I think Josh Landers has all the constituent parts to be a very good striker for a Nuno Espirito Santo side. He's strong. He's quite quick. He's quite lethal as well and clinical. And he's obviously very early on in his stage now. I know we've got the likes of Callum Marshall. I just don't think Callum fits the mould of striker that he wants. Not saying he couldn't have a good career at West Ham, in terms of being part of the squad, but I just don't see him as the number 9, so to speak. Josh 𝗔𝗨𝗪, very clinical player, but I think for me, he's more like a sort of left-sided player rather than necessarily an out-and-out striker, or an out-and-out number 9 rather. Or sort of the type of number. It's almost like an old-fashioned number 9, the big lad. But nowadays you have to be a big lad who has a bit about him in terms of pace, in terms of skill. He has the ability to hold it up, bring in players, but can turn and run and beat players and score, from outside the box, as well as being sort of the fox in the box as well. You sort of have to be a complete player, really, to be that sort of modern number 9. I don't think necessarily Nicholas has got the legs for it now, by the sounds of it. So gutted, because I don't like players not doing well for West Ham, just because I think he's got the right personality to be a West Ham, fond, cult hero type player. But it just hasn't worked. And sometimes I think you just got to cut your losses. You can keep reaching for the stars, but you're never going to get them. Sometimes you've got to move on, and it does seem that's the case with Nicholas. Let us know in the comments what you think about that. And I'll speak to you a little bit later on Hammer's Headlines, talking about one of our academy players who is getting a lot of interest, unsurprisingly, really. But until next time, take care, stay safe, stay warm, stay humble, keep the faith, and I'll see you soon, my laddios. Much love. Bye-bye.